Today on Insidious Islands, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear Virgin Islands? I bet it's not a former sitting president, Jeffrey Epstein, and one of the world's largest banks. Have you ever heard of First Lady Yolanda Bryan, who held an op-ed position of influence at the Economic Development Authority? Or how about Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, who went from attorney to whistleblower just to save her own skin? But her actions wouldn't save her from hackers releasing intimate family videos and topless photos. I guess that's what happens when you're corrupt. And today, we are going to reveal more corruption and connections than you ever thought. Here on TimberTalk, Navigating the Political Forest special episode.
Welcome to a TimberTalk special. We are about to dive into something real deep here. We're going to chop through the brush and navigate the political forest so you guys can, know the truth. Getting right to it, let's take a deep dive into the misuse of power, corruption, and illegal activities in the United States Virgin Islands. So, guys, there's going to be a coverage of job connections, Epstein-linked financial decisions, and congressional conflict, and a little bit of scandal here and there. So let's get right to it. Let's see. All right. So Yolanda Bryan was first lady to the current governor of the United States Virgin Islands, Albert Bryan. And shortly after taking office, a special business ambassador position was created at the Economic Development Authority. And Mrs. Bryan would later be appointed to this position. Ambassador Yolanda Bryan has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Not only was her now ex-husband governor of the Virgin Islands, she also had a cushy $75,000 a year position. What are the roles of the EDA's business ambassador? Well, they are to represent the EDA internationally, attract and engage developers, serve as the public face of the EDA. Now, knowing this, why would someone at this level of importance have a LinkedIn that's completely bare? Let's take a look at that. Completely bare. Now, this lady's supposed to be important, right? Why does her LinkedIn page look like this? This really leads to other questions, such as, why didn't the position exist before Bryan took office in 2019? And was the position created just for her? So, moving on. What is the role of the overall positioning for this role? It seemed like they created this just so they can make more money. So, and I know you guys are like, well, what does this have to do with Epstein? We're here for Epstein. Be patient. We're going to get there. Gotta build it up first. Going on to the next segment of this right here, we have congressional conflict or cover-up. This is Stacey Plaskett. Plaskett served as the EDA's, yes, that same Economic Development Authority's, she served as a general counsel from 2007 to 2012 and became later a congressional delegate for the Virgin Islands in 2015. Now, this lady is out of New York. She does not live in the Virgin Islands, so we have to keep this in mind. She is on the mainland, not the islands. So in 2023, she became the ranking House member of the House Judiciary Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government. Now, that's very, very important because the position that she had on this committee was to actually make sure the federal government wasn't being weaponized for political gain. Later, in January 2025, that position was dissolved by the handiwork of Doge.
The focus quickly shifted from the contents of the leaks to damage.
My bad. Sorry. My apologies. I weren't supposed to hit that yet. So, in 2016, intimate videos and photos of Stacey Plaskett's personal computer were leaked online, including topless photos and footage of her husband, Jonathan Buckney Small, who was a former professional tennis player, dressed in drag alongside a minor. Now, rather than addressing the potential ethical concerns or background context, Plaskett framed this incident as a disgusting invasion of privacy and positioned herself as a victim. But here's the issue. When the public officials were entangled in scandals, especially ones involving children and compromised devices, transparency is paramount. So why wasn't she transparent to the people she presided over?
The focus quickly shifted from the contents of the leaks to damage control. But the public never got the answers they rightfully deserved, and this would eventually leave a very sour taste in the Virgin Islands.
A sour taste indeed. So, was this whole leak merely a political sabotage for Stacey Plaskett, or does this shine light on a political cover-up? Second question should elected officials be allowed to frame scandals as personal attacks to avoid scrutiny? These are things that were asked in this whole situation going on back in 2016. Now, moving on to the next segment here, we have Miss Plaskett once again in the news. So, the archived article from the Virgin Islands, Plaskett and Naked, was captured by the people of the Virgin Islands, and it tested their feelings towards it. And many of them were not buying the whole victim narrative. The local commentators expressed that they had a great disgust at the exposure of minors, being that her husband was taking pictures dressed in drag, scantily clad drag at that, with minors, and their frustration with the double standards in the law enforcement. Whereas if an adult that wasn't in the political realm did this, they'd be arrested. And in this particular case, back in 2016, she got off with a slap on the wrist and moved on as if it never happened. There was perceived outrage over the arrogance of political figures as well, and officials who dodged responsibility but still claimed the moral high ground.
While national media painted Plaskett as a victim of hacking, locals asked harder questions, ones the FBI never answered and the media never followed up on.
So, one of the questions I present to you guys here in comment land was, she actually fit to serve on the subcommittee for the weaponization of the federal government, knowing that she had this scandal going on? Now, what's crazy about this particular individual, she started out as a Republican in office. Now she is a Democrat in office. Ever since 2016, ever since taking that position, she's been a Democrat. She comes out of the Southern District of New York, and we know how we feel about the Southern District of New York. Full of scandal, full of lies, full of deceit. So, ask yourself, was this lady fit to serve given her actions that she went through? Now, let's check this out. Moving on to the next segment, let's get to the meat and the potatoes as to why you're here. I had to paint a little picture earlier on, but now we can get into what you really want to hear. What does this all have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Well, his influence, from the campaign donations to tax breaks and registry waivers linking to the Bryan-Plaskett alliance. So these two ladies that were mentioned before knew each other, and they were in the pocket of Jeffrey Epstein. Were those funds being used that he gave properly, or were they being diverted somehow? And who's really holding the local authorities accountable in this particular situation? It's almost as if these people were political pawns, or not even political pawns, just pawns to a greater scheme. Now, when we look into this next segment here, segment 8, we're going to see what really went down. Now, we have the Epstein entities that are encapsulated into 6 different court filings, which includes all of his estates. So we have the Jeffrey Epstein estate, We have the 1953 trust of Jeffrey Epstein and over 30 shell companies such as JEGE LLC, Cypress Incorporated, Hyperion Air LLC, Little St. Jim LLC, which you should pay attention to the Little St. Jim LLC, Southern Trust Company, Zorro Management LLC, and Gratitude America LTD. Jeffrey Epstein had a slew and myriad of companies, some shell, some legitimate, where he ran things through. And it gets a little bit thicker as we dive into this particular section.
Prosecutors allege these entities were used to move money, influence politics, and shield assets spanning real estate, aviation, finance, and philanthropic fronts.
Now, knowing that this was all a ploy by Jeffrey Epstein and a cover-up to basically launder money and keep things hush-hush and looking legitimate on the outside, we need to know what this man, really did. As I said, Plaskett, who seems to just keep popping up in this, denied that she ever had any involvement in any of this. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, give me 1 second. Let me grab that screenshot for you guys so we can keep it kosher. This particular screenshot right here. Let's drag that over here. Come on. And we're going to drop that right here for you guys right here. Now, this woman, when questioned about her involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, because remember, she was a part of this task force on a subcommittee that was created to prevent the weaponization of, the federal government. She denied having any involvement or knowing anything about what's going on with Jeffrey Epstein. But the problem is she was receiving money from Jeffrey Epstein through some of these shell corporations and some legitimate. He helped fund her rise to political stardom. So why is she later on denying that she had any involvement in any of this stuff with Jeffrey Epstein? Pretty crazy, right? So the rundown. We're going to take a bigger swing and cut into some bigger wood. The real question is, what does Epstein have to do with a $75 million JPMorgan settlement? And let's take a look at that right here. Let's see. So we also want to look into the firing of Denise George, the Maxwell sisters, and Google. So we have several segments that we're going to look into. Like I told you guys before, earlier when I was advertising this for you, this is something that goes far beyond just your typical political moves. And we know Jeffrey Epstein had politicians in his back pocket, showing that he had the governor's wife in his back pocket. He had Plaskett, who was a congressional member, in his back pocket. But he also had a lot of dealings with JPMorgan. Like you'll see that JPMorgan actually paid off some of his victims, as we call them. So in this particular segment right here, we have, let's see, let me grab it right here. I've moved too far down. Boop, 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 boop. All right, let's see. Two. Okay, I got that one right there. All right. So, moving forward, now that everything's situated over here, I apologize. We're going to untangle some of these vines that we've ran into with this particular segment here. The U.S. Virgin Islands attorneys, Denise George, filed several lawsuits with the whole situation with JPMorgan Chase, accusing that the bank was enabling Jeffrey Epstein's entanglement. So this lady right here, where are you at? Where are you at, ma'am? Right here. Oh, wrong one. Right here. So we have this lady right here, pictured right here to my right, is the lady that filed all of these lawsuits. And in these filings, you'll see that she later on went into great detail. This is a 30-page lawsuit, though heavily redacted with some areas. She did file this lawsuit against them, and she ended up paying for it because later on, your boy Joseph Robinette Biden, let me go ahead and grab that, decided to come take a trip to visit her. He took a trip to visit her. And most people are like, well, what's going on? But the problem is, you know, Joseph Robinette Biden was the first sitting president to visit the U.S. Virgin Islands since Harry Truman. So 2 sitting presidents. Joseph Robinette Biden had been the first to do it since Harry Truman. And he stayed on the island of St. Croix. And he went there December 27th through January 2nd. This is the same island where the governor's mansion for Albert Bryan was. Now, don't think I'm, obtuse, but in this particular situation, let me go ahead and drop these right here for you. In this particular situation, I find something to be very, very fishy, because Joe Biden, let me find this one for you. Joe Biden actually has done this before. Let me grab that. I thought that was in there, but we're going to move this. We'll move this over here in a second. So just giving you more of the timeline. So he flies in on the 27th around 11 p.m. Around 11 p.m. Now, we know Joe Biden's kind of old, right? We know he's old. So why is he flying to this place? Because this lady is bringing suit against JPMorgan. Well, let's look at this right here. I'm going to throw this up here for you guys. Let's see. I think right here.
I said, no, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Now, here's a timeline of this. So we see that she files the lawsuits against JPMorgan in conjunction with paying off, the victims and all of this stuff. Then we see that Biden leaves to the Virgin Islands for a relaxing vacation shortly after the filing. And he stays through January 2nd, but he goes straight to the governor's mansion. And then we see that Denise George is fired. Now, I played that situation from earlier in 2014 where he did something very, very similar by going to Ukraine to have prosecutor Victor Shokin fired. And then shortly after that, we see him doing the same thing. And we know it's the same thing because this lady was fired after he gets there. So it begs the question, did he, push Governor Bryan to fire this lady, Denise George, from doing her job? And again, she was fired with no reasons. So the media is like, wait a minute, why is she getting fired? And there was no reasons given. But what Governor Bryan did say is he was going to have her replaced by Carol Thomas Jacobs. Now, Biden's unprecedented visit and timing raised a lot of questions at the time, and they were wondering if he pressured the governor to do this. And like I said, we know that he did this. And I believe personally that the whole purpose of him doing this was to shield JPMorgan, because the case went away right after this. It just completely disappeared. And to also protect James Biden, which was Joe Biden's brother, and other high-level executives from exposures in the decades-long extortion, bribery, and human trafficking ring. So this lady, Denise George, was about to blow the top on all of this. And like I told you guys before, this is more than political. Although political pawns are being moved and pushed to do things, this is about the money. It's all about the money. And it almost sounds like a quid pro quo, does it not? And I call him quid pro quo Joe because, like you saw in Ukraine, he did this before. So we have now a timeline of this woman doing something, Joe Biden a current sitting president doing something, and then later on, her job's gone. And the case just, poof, gone in smoke. Now, March 9th, 2023, let's go ahead and drop that timeline here. March 9th, 2023, JPMorgan sues former executive Jess Staley, redirecting scrutiny away from the upper leadership. So they had to make a quick swing. So Joe Biden comes in January, does what he December to January does what he does, and a couple of months later, we see JPMorgan's like, oh, we got to get the heat off of our executives. Let's go ahead and do this and shift the goalposts and shift the attention to something new. So we have this one right here. Let's see, moving right here. We see later on that JPMorgan is going to have to end up paying out $290 to $300 million in this particular little doohickey here. And then right after paying out this settlement, JPMorgan was then questioned again, and we see they went out here and pulled a Hillary Clinton. They pulled a Hillary Clinton. They accidentally deleted 47 million emails. 47 million emails. Why? It's because someone ended up picking up the case again. So June 16th, 2023, Judge Jed S. Rakoff rules that JPMorgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, will not be required to testify in the upcoming case. Why? What are we covering up? Now, Judge Rakoff is in the Southern District of New York. Why is this case from the Virgin Islands being heard in the Southern District of New York? Kind of strange, right? June 20th, 2023, Project Jeep emails and texts between Staley and Epstein were unsealed at the United States Virgin Islands request. Uh-oh. So we have the deletion of a bunch of emails. We have all of these requests for things to be unsealed, and people are scrambling now. Judge Staley asked the court to unseal documents he says will implicate Jamie Dimon, the current CEO of JPMorgan Chase. But that went nowhere. This case had 3 pages of documentation you could read for days and days and days, and nothing seemed to come from this. Now, again, I ask you guys, why was JPMorgan paying out to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein? What does JPMorgan have to do with this? Now, one of JPMorgan's board members, Jim Crown, dies on June 25th, 2023, in a mysterious racetrack accident after his brake lines were allegedly cut. His brake lines were mysteriously cut. It's crazy. But moving on to the next one, we have subpoenas all over the place. And if you go in and look at this case, and if you look at the top here, you can get the case number there, and you go pull up all of these. They were doing subpoenas for everybody. And yes, if you see right in the middle there, that says Elon Musk. Elon Musk had his own involvement in this. So they subpoenaed Elon Musk for questioning, and the Attorney General's office files a legal request at the same time for the documents that Jess Staley wanted before. And they began to, again, subpoena everyone as a result of this because they couldn't get answers. So if you can't get answers, you got to do what's right now. Get everybody to talk. So we see that Epstein has involvement with Elon Musk. Bet you didn't see that in the news. No one was talking about it because Elon Musk wasn't on the radar at the time. He wasn't a friend of Donald J. Trump at the time. So therefore, no need to talk about Elon Musk in the news. This thing went in and went out. Nobody even heard about this. Like I said, all of this information was right in front of your face the whole time. You just didn't connect the dots.
This isn't just a case about corruption. It's a playbook of suppression, political leverage, and institutional cover-up. A lawsuit dropped, a president lands, an AG is fired, and silence follows. Coincidence or coordination?
100% coordination. Again, this court case went nowhere. It got swept under the rug just like everything else. And we're sitting here wondering what's going on. Why is this happening? Well, it's a cover-up. It's literally a political cover-up. But moving on to the other connections. Let's check this out.
Ghislaine Maxwell is best known as Jeffrey Epstein's longtime associate, but her influence didn't stop at private jets and elite circles. She played a direct role in the operations tied to Epstein's empire in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Yes, she played the biggest role you could think of. She was really like the puppeteer. She was the one pulling all the strings. So from 1999 to 2006, Maxwell was on the payroll, not just by Jeffrey Epstein personally, but through multiple business entities linked to him. Many of these companies were registered or operated out of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Yeah. I'll let that sink in a little bit. One of the main responsibilities of Miss Maxwell was managing Epstein's properties. She also ran this dental scam for him as well. But her management duties that included her now infamous Little St. James Island, which became the epicenter of Epstein's trafficking network. But here's something interesting. Maybe you guys can go to Google Maps and look at Big St. James Island. Earlier I mentioned one of the companies of Epstein. It was called Little St. Jim. Jim is a shortening of James. So we see here that if you go to Google Maps and look at that island, St. James Big Island, this is where a lot of his properties were. Yet there's not a lot of properties there if you go look on Google Maps. So what was she managing as far as real estate with him goes? But years later, Maxwell ended up filing a lawsuit against the U.S. Virgin Islands, and it was the U.S. Virgin Islands against Epstein. She claimed that he owed her money. You know, when you start messing with people's money, they get a little funny. Nobody likes having their money messed with. And security and relocation expenses were due to her from Epstein. The government of the Virgin Islands tried to intervene with this. They tried to step in and shut her out on this, calling it a part of a broader investigation. So she tried to go through the Virgin Islands to get it done, but they said, no. We're going to take care of this. This is bigger than you. But this really is all about the Epstein enterprise, isn't it? So there's also the Terra Mar project, which was a nonprofit Maxwell launched as an oceanic conservation effort. But that organization shortly went under scrutiny as well after Epstein was arrested in 2019. Terra Mar ended up shutting down shortly after that. Reports, including from Business Insider, raised concerns about the possible connection between the group and Epstein's criminal activities. So, Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't just connected to Epstein, she helped run the entire infrastructure, and the U.S. Virgin Islands weren't just a tropical backdrop for these people to hang out in. They were the essential base for all of these operations.
Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't the only one deeply embedded in power structures. Her twin sisters, Christine and Isabel Maxwell, quietly helped build the tools used by governments and tech giants to track, catalog, and control.
Now, I know this seems like it's all over the place, but let's tie it all together in a really cute little bow. We got Ghislaine Maxwell. We know she's the right-hand man to Epstein. We got Epstein paying off people on the island so he can do what he needs to do. He got people in the federal government running cover for him. What does the Maxwell sisters have to do with this? Well, going back in time, we have a company called Magellan. Magellan was not just a search engine, but a gatekeeper in the early 1990s. Christine and Isabel co-founded Magellan, so they and this was a so-called search engine with editorial oversight. But what really went on with this was a curated access to what people were allowed to and not allowed to find online. It was sold to a company called Excite in 1996, but Magellan Technologies and data practices became the blueprint for control information ecosystems, along with other little oddities here and there, even before Google dominated. This wasn't innovation. It was early stage internet surveillance cloaked as convenience. Now, later on, a company called Chalad, which is linked to the FBI surveillance software, was created by Ghislaine Maxwell, the other sister. Now, this was a data mining company that became essential to the FBI's post 9/11 surveillance operations. It powered the FBI's counterterrorism data warehouse, allowing real-time scanning of private databases, emails, and communications under the guise of national security, aka the Patriot Act. Now, before I go on, I want you guys to really think about this. We have Jeffrey Epstein running this trafficking ring, running multiple shell corporations, offshore shell corporations, money being moved left and right. He ends up getting a $15 million payout from JPMorgan as well, which I didn't mention earlier. We have all of these moving parts, and no one was able to pick this up. Now, along with these two genius-level twin sisters creating all of these softwares, the particular software that the federal government ended up using was built to harvest, cross-analyze, and flag communications, domestic and foreign. And this was ended up being deployed in partnership with federal contractors as well. So ask yourself, what was really going on? These people were harvesting data. This is why I always tell you guys to be careful with what you're doing on social media, because as soon as you get dinged and flagged, all of your content will be dinged and flagged. And every time you say something that's relatively close to that, it's dinged and flagged and cataloged. And this was all created by the Maxwell sisters. That's not a civic duty, guys. That's spy tech sold at to the highest bidder, which we know the FBI, being a part of the federal government, is always going to be the highest bidder. So that brings in your ties to big tech, but there's more. There's a lot more. So while Google didn't directly acquire Magellan, its architecture was borrowed heavily from platforms like it, showing early entanglement between the Maxwell sisters and ventures and what would later become Google's data domination model. So Isabel later served as the president to a company called ComTouch, an Israeli cybersecurity company known as Crime or Siren, however you want to pronounce it, and a frequent contractor for the governments and corporate surveillance projects around the world. Now, these sisters are super heavily invested in monitoring what any and everybody's doing. At this time now, everybody's got a smartphone. Everybody's got Google. They use Google Maps. Google Maps, have you ever wondered why Google Maps was free? Yeah, everything else costs. Why is Google Maps free? Same thing with Apple and their maps as well. But why is it free? Why is this service free? Everybody else, you remember Garmin? How you used to have to pay for your Garmin, pay for your maps, pay for your updates for your maps. Why is Google Maps and Apple Maps free? Could they just be surveilling you? Now, I've done this experiment several times where I've put on my airplane mode, I've disabled my location, I've actually not uninstalled because you can't uninstall it. I actually even archived Google Maps so it would not be something that it was tracking. Turned my phone off and just went on drives. I went on a 3-hour motorcycle ride. Do you know when I got home, turned my phone on, re-enabled the application, turned off airplane mode, it had a tracking of everything I did that day, every location I went. This is all created by the Maxwell sisters. So no wonder Jeffrey Epstein was able to fly under the radar here, there, and everywhere. he had inside control through Ghislaine Maxwell. So the Maxwell sisters aren't just some quirky inventors. This family was deeply tied and in bed with the intelligence and control and surveillance all across the world. No wonder things didn't pop up like we thought they should, because this was all planned. So while Ghislaine Maxwell groomed victims for Epstein and elite clientele, her sisters helped groom the internet for surveillance and control. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's business as usual. In circles of unchecked power, the Maxwell name doesn't end with scandal. It begins with infrastructure. So ask yourself this. Was Jeffrey Epstein the one really in control, guys? I'm serious. Was Jeffrey Epstein the one really in control? Or was it the sisters? Was it the three sisters? Did they have control? And I'm just looking at your guys' comments right here, right now, seeing what y'all are talking about down here. Let's see. See if I can answer a few questions. You guys are all in agreement. That's crazy. So I'm worried about a few things here, and I want to lay this down before I shut the segment down. Did you know that Palantir was connected with all of this? Palantir has been in the news and on my segments before, at least twice, as a data surveillance company. Now, Palantir, Palantir, just got awarded a contract with the federal government. Now, this is one of the things I disagreed with Trump with. Palantir is going to be used to create a America First checker to make sure everyone is a citizen. Now, the Patriot Act was created to be able to spy on all the people, right? And the Maxwell sisters created the software to be able to do this, right? Patriot Act sunsets. They create the USA Act. The USA Act ends up being something that is like basically the Patriot Act on steroids. And now we see Trump allowing people with companies like Palantir to be able to come forward and track you right out the gate, just to make sure, under the guise of making sure you're American. Now, do I believe that Trump knows about all of these interconnections? Possibly. Maybe. I don't know. It doesn't seem so, but, you know, when you're in bed with powerful people don't always show their hand until it's too late. And they're wanting to create a system that tracks all of the United States inhabitants to make sure they're legal. This is just another front, guys. It's another front, and maybe Trump's a pawn, or maybe he's one playing the game. Who knows? Only time will tell. Only time will tell. So, moving on. I know you guys want to know, because I said Google earlier. You guys want to know how Google's connected. Well, Epstein and Silicon Valley are have internal connections through JPMorgan Chase and their employees. So there were emails and correspondence for JPMorgan setting up a conference call at the request of someone referred to as Catherine. The topic of this particular call was Jeffrey Epstein's role as an advisor to the founders of Google's kids. The program would be called GRATS, Grats, a type of trust specifically for the founders' kids. Now, this would suggest that Epstein was deeply involved in a high advising profile role with the tech wealth. So this is how we don't see money being moved around. When you are in bed with the people that controls the zeros and the ones, they can make things look a certain way and disappear a certain kind of way with no trace at all. Even serving in roles connected to children's finances and legacies, Epstein was wrapped up in it. Now, the FBI missed an opportunity here. Former FBI Special Agent Sean O'Neill revealed that JPMorgan withheld vital information about Epstein's suspicious banking activity. Go figure. It's kind of like how Joe Biden, we ask, hey, where'd that $5.2 million come from when you put out your transparency report? And you were so happy to do this. Well, Donald Trump can't put out his finances. I'm going to put mine out. Here's my. Where did the $5.2 million come from, Joe? Mr. Quid Pro Quo Joe, where'd the money come from? So the FBI dropped the ball, or did they? Were they in on the take as well? By the way, Special Agent Sean O'Neill doesn't have a job anymore. He lost his job shortly after that. He ended up stating that over $3 million was paid by Epstein to women, many of whom had Eastern European surnames. Had the FBI been notified of these transactions sooner, O'Neill argued, Epstein would have been federally charged much earlier. Would he? Would he have? His loan to the modeling agency MC2 was known for trafficking as well and abuse of these women. So he creates a modeling agency that's not American, that's got American ties, and these women were being abused through this. And we know that they start models early, right? Real early. How did this all go under the radar? Could it have been that the Maxwell sisters were, running interference? Could it have been that the government was just on it the whole time? Could it have been that these big banking companies had control all along? Follow the money, find the truth. Everybody wants an Epstein list, but with this kind of like covert operations within the whole move of things, you're not going to find a list. A list doesn't exist. This is not something that's tangible. Only thing you might find are videos of nasty, disgusting human beings doing things to underage individuals. But you're not going to find some tangible list. There's too much money involved. On top of having all of this money, like I've been saying for months and years, there's prime ministers, presidents, kings, queens, princes from all over the world involved in this. You're not getting a list. Get over it. And if you get anything, it'll be 40 years from now when everyone's involvement in this, those people are dead and gone. So you have court documents that show Epstein wasn't the lone predator that everyone thought he was. He was a well-contracted financial player embedded in global banking, tech, and fashion. And many institutions, including JPMorgan Chase and the FBI and Congress and the executive branch, because Joe Biden did what he does best, flies in and, son of a bee, she's fired. Just like he did with Victor Shokin to protect his financial interest. And then you get Trump being impeached for quid pro quo when Joe did the same thing. The problem is what Joe did was absolutely unconstitutional and illegal. Once that money's been allocated for and accounted for by Congress and signed by the president, it's theirs. But Joe leveraged that money over their head just to get someone fired. Joe took a relaxing vacation to the Virgin Islands and comes back and somebody is fired. All over what? Financial interests and money. We can't ignore this anymore. You guys should stop looking for a list and start looking into all of the red flags here and there that's been in your faces for years. Guys, I thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure to bring you this information. It was ragtag. This is my first time doing a special, but I appreciate you guys. Make sure you drop the bar, click that like button for me, share it, get it out there so everybody can have this information as well. You guys have to understand that there is so much at play here that far exceeds just political movements and political ideologies. This is something that exceeds the United States in itself. This is something that is global. This is something that's not going to get released because it is global. And in case anything happens to me, I'm not suicidal. I would never kill myself, just so you guys know. But this information does need to be scrutinized and looked at. And if you can, download this, keep it, share it to your friends so everybody can know it. I have so many pieces of documentation that I did not show today, just for the simple fact that this would be a 4-hour special. And I'm not going to do that to you guys. I know, short attention spans. But take a look, go back over this, recap all of my findings, and fact check me in real time. All of the web pages are there. All of the documentation's there. If you got time, go look at the Southern District of New York's government website, and you can find the court case. It was listed here today. This legacy is far beyond what you even know with Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't personally think he's gone. From some of the other information that I've come across, I don't think he's gone. Could be. Who knows? But our government does so many dirty things, you'll never know the truth. So, in closing, I appreciate you guys for coming. I hope I gave you information to dig into, to bite your teeth into, that maybe you can run with later. And I will push to keep bringing you guys factual information, truthful information, day in and day out, just so you guys can stay up on things. I don't care about being first. I care about being right. And if you know what's right, you won't be deceived by what's wrong. So, appreciate you guys. And as always, make sure you're not missing the forest for the trees. Have a good day.